The sailors on this hose aren't just cleaning that chain. They're racing against a chemical reaction that starts the second the chain leaves the water. One that, left unchecked, could leave a 100,000-ton nuclear warship unable to hold its own position. But the anchor chain is just the first thing trying to destroy the ship. The ocean attacks the ship from below while 5,000 sailors wear it down from within. The only thing keeping this ship operational is a maintenance cycle that never, ever stops. And it all starts with this massive chain. Every time a carrier weighs anchor, hundreds of feet of chain drag through silt, debris, and marine growth on the way back up. All of it rides through the hawse pipe, the narrow steel tube in the bow that the chain feeds through you see here. And every bit of it is soaked in salt and whatever crap is on the ocean floor. That's what you're watching, the washdown. Sailors hit the chain with fire hoses while it's still moving because once the links coil into the chain locker below deck, anything left on them starts working. Salt pools at the bottom, mud and sand wear down the chain. Corrosion doesn't wait for an invitation, it starts immediately, chewing through the galvanized coating, pitting the metal underneath, weakening the one system standing between a 100,000-ton warship and drifting wherever the current takes it. The washdown buys time, but time is all it buys. What most people don't realize is that even a perfectly washed chain is still degrading. Salt water doesn't need visible rust to do damage. It works at the molecular level, turning galvanized steel into something that looks fine on the surface, but crumbles under load. The Navy has lost anchors this way, not because they broke free, but because nobody caught the corrosion in time. So the chain has to be torn apart and rebuilt, and that job is one of the ugliest on the ship. During a planned pierside availability, the crew runs the chain out of the locker and onto the deck or down to a barge. If it's summer, the steel is hot enough to burn through gloves. If it's winter in Norfolk, you're doing this in freezing wind off the Elizabeth River. Either way, the chain keeps coming. If you've never seen a carrier anchor chain laid out in the open, the scale is disorienting. It stretches longer than a football field, each length big enough to sit in. What looks manageable coiled in the locker suddenly looks like industrial infrastructure. Because that's exactly what it is. What happens next sounds simple, but feels like punishment. Sailors grab needle guns, pneumatic tools that fire clusters of blunt-tip rods into the surface, and start working link by link. The needles conform to every curve and divot, chipping rust and old paint down to bare metal. Hold the gun at 45 degrees, work a 6-inch patch, move on. 1,000 feet of this. The noise alone will rattle your teeth. Even through hearing protection, you feel it in your jaw and your wrists. The vibration numbs your hands within minutes. After a few hours, your forearms feel like you've been arm wrestling a jackhammer, which, in a way, you have. But here's the cruel part. Strip steel down to bare metal in a salt air environment and it flash rusts almost immediately, sometimes in less than an hour. So right behind the needle gun crew comes the painting crew, laying down primer and marine-grade anti-corrosion paint before the atmosphere can undo the work. Then the proper color-coded marking system gets reapplied. Red links, white links, blue markers, wire-wrapped detachable links, each pattern telling the brake operator in the windlass room exactly how much chain is paid out during a drop. Picture what that operator sees when the chain is running. Colors blurring past in a tiny viewpoint at 10 fathoms per minute. Get those markings wrong and he has no idea how much chain is on the bottom. That's how you lose an anchor, which, for something that weighs 30 tons, is impressively hard to find once it's gone. Or worse, that's how 30 tons of steel does something nobody planned for. But rust, at least, is patient. What the carrier uses every single day is not. Step onto the flight deck before dawn and you can feel the non-skid surface through your boot soles. A gritty, sandpaper-like coating that grabs your feet with every step. Aircraft are spotted across 4.5 acres of open steel, chained to pad eyes in rows so tight the wingtips nearly touch. In a few hours, this surface will be an active runway. Right now, it's the cleanest it'll be all day. It won't last. Every square foot of this surface matters, because a single loose bolt can destroy a $70 million aircraft. Foreign object debris, or FOD, is the flight deck's permanent enemy. A bolt, a strip of safety wire, a chunk of blown tire rubber that nobody saw kick free during the last recovery. Any of these left on the deck during flight operations can get sucked into a jet engine intake. At 150 miles per hour, a half-inch bolt hits turbine blades with enough force to shatter them. The engine tears itself apart from the inside out. FOD damage costs the military hundreds of millions of dollars per year, and every single incident traces back to one thing: something someone didn't pick up. So multiple times a day during flight ops, the FOD walkdown happens. Watch them line up. Hundreds of sailors, shoulder to shoulder, stretch across the full width of the flight deck. They walk from one end to the other, heads down, eyes locked on the non-skid surface, scanning for anything that doesn't belong. No machine replaces this. No drone, no sensor array, nothing but human eyes and human hands every single time. If you find something, you hold it up. If you don't find something and a jet swallows it 20 minutes later, and the investigation will absolutely happen, every sailor on that walkdown already knows the inquiry will trace back to exactly who walked that section of deck. Accountability on a flight deck is absolute. It has to be. The consequences are measured in aircraft and lives. After flight operations secure for the day, the real cleaning starts. Aviation boatswain's mates break out fire hoses and spray the deck with cleaning compounds. Within minutes, the entire flight deck turns white. 4.5 acres of foam several inches deep, stretching from bow to fantail. It looks like a snowstorm hit the middle of the Pacific, when hundreds of sailors drop to hands and knees with scrub brushes and squeegees and work their way across the entire surface, pushing walls of foam toward the deck edges where it drains overboard. What they're scrubbing off is a film of JP5 jet fuel and hydraulic fluid that 12 hours of flight operations baked onto the surface. The non-skid coating that keeps sailors upright depends entirely on its rough texture for grip. Let oil build up and boots start sliding. On a surface where jet blast hits 300 degrees and catapult steam can send you spinning, you don't get a second chance to catch your footing. Sailors have been blown overboard by jet exhaust. A greasy flight deck makes that happen faster. The Navy built a machine for this, the Mobile Cleaning and Recovery System, essentially an $850,000 Zamboni that blasts a surface with 2,500 psi of water, vacuums up debris, and uses magnets to catch metallic FOD. It recycles its own water and cleans faster than any crew could. But it doesn't replace the FOD walkdown. It does not replace hands and knees with a scrub brush. Some things on a carrier still come down to a sailor and a tool, and probably always will. Which, unfortunately for these sailors, is exactly how the habitability systems work. And if you thought scrubbing jet fuel off a flight deck was unpleasant, the next part of this ship will test your gag reflex. 18,000 meals a day. Think about what that means just in dishes. Trays and serving pans alone would fill a room. And every single one needs to be washed, sanitized, and back in circulation before the next meal cycle starts. The scullery never stops. Watch these sailors feeding trays into commercial-grade dishwashing machines that blast everything with water hot enough to sterilize surgical instruments. The line stretches out the door and down the passageway. During peak hours, the pace is relentless. Grab, spray, load, repeat for hours. Scullery duty is rotational, typically assigned to junior sailors on temporary duty, and it is universally considered one of the worst jobs on the ship. You signed up to defend your country. You are now washing trays at a speed that would make a Waffle House dishwasher ask if you're okay. You spend your shift in a room that is deafening, hot enough to fog your vision the second you walk in. And wet? Everything is always wet. Your boots never dry. Your hands prune inside rubber gloves even though you've only been at it for an hour. And the line of dirty trays isn't getting any shorter. It won't either. The only break is when the meal cycle ends. And by then, the next one is 90 minutes away. Food scraps go into pulpers, industrial grinders that reduce organic waste to slurry for overboard discharge when the ship is far enough from shore. Everything else gets sorted by hand. Sailors feed plastics into presses that melt them down into dense pucks about 18 inches across and 4 inches thick. Metal waste gets compressed into 55-gallon drums that weigh 300 pounds when sealed, and somebody has to move those drums by hand. Then there's the incinerator. For the record, incinerator duty ranks right alongside the scullery on the list of jobs nobody volunteers for. You stand in a compartment that smells like burning trash, because it is burning trash. Feeding material into a system that runs on JP5 jet fuel at temperatures north of 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat radiates through your coveralls, and ventilation barely keeps up. And if something goes in that shouldn't, say an aerosol can someone didn't sort properly, You find out about it immediately and loudly. Then there's the compactor. Since you can't throw metal waste over the side without first processing it, this machine turns all that scrap into 8 to 10 barrels of compressed waste metal a day. Federal maritime law dictates exactly what goes over the side and in what form. Violate those rules and the commanding officer gets a ticket he or she is personally responsible for. Not the ship, not the Navy, the CO. But that's just the food waste that doesn't get eaten. With 5,000 people and 3 meals a day, use your imagination for what else enters the plumbing. Deep in the lower decks, the carrier's sewage system, collection, holding, and transfer, or CHT, runs on gravity. Waste flows downhill through a network of pipes into holding tanks that sit near the bottom of the ship, surrounded by machinery spaces where the smell, even when everything is working correctly, never fully goes away. From the holding tanks, the waste gets processed through a marine sanitation device, essentially a treatment system that scrubs the water until it meets federal discharge standards. Only then does it get pumped overboard. Only when the ship is at least 3 nautical miles from shore. The carrier pushes roughly 410,000 gallons of processed wastewater into the ocean every single day. When the system works, nobody thinks about it. When it doesn't, everybody knows immediately. The smell hits first. Raw sewage backing up through drains in berthing compartments, heads, and showers. 5,000 people, nowhere to go. And the plumbing just quit. On the Gerald R. Ford, the Navy's newest carrier, the vacuum-driven sewage pipes were built too narrow for a crew of over 4,000. The system clogs constantly. The fix? Flushing the entire sewage network with an acidic compound strong enough to dissolve whatever is blocking the line. Cost per flush? $400,000. Almost makes your local plumber sound reasonable. However nasty as this work is, at least it is something the crew can control. Because what's happening on the outside of the hull is something the crew has no defenses for. Below the waterline, the ocean is eating the ship alive. Barnacles, thousands of them, along with algae, tube worms, and everything else the ocean can stick to steel. All of it attaching from day one. On a hull this size, 1,092 feet long with a 37-foot draft, heavy biofouling increases drag by as much as 60%. That forces the reactor plant to work harder and burns through operational capacity that cannot be replaced at sea. Across the fleet, the Navy estimates biofouling cost roughly $1 billion a year in degraded performance. Even nuclear-powered ships feel it. But the real problem isn't cost. A carrier that can't make 30 knots can't generate enough wind over the flight deck to launch aircraft. A dirty hull doesn't slow the ship down. It can ground the air wing if the ship can't move fast enough to put air over its deck to help generate lift. So someone has to go under. Topside, the operation looks like a small industrial work site floating next to the carrier. A dive barge sits along the hull with compressors, communication consoles, and a dive supervisor monitoring every breath and every word from the divers below. Nothing happens underwater without the supervisor's knowledge. If a diver sounds confused or slurs a status report, the supervisor can order them pulled up immediately. Beneath the surface, ship husbandry divers, Navy divers, or specialized civilian contractors clean the hull by hand and machine. The primary tool is the SCAMP, the Submerged Cleaning and Maintenance Platform, a diver-operated multi-brush system held against the hull by the suction of a massive impeller pumping 13,500 gallons of seawater per minute. That's enough force to pin you to the steel if you're not careful. The brushes rotate. The diver guides the machine along the hull at roughly 9 inches per second, scraping away everything the ocean has attached. For the spots the SCAMP can't reach, sea chests, sonar domes, and every tight corner around the rudders and shafts, divers go in with hand scrapers and hydraulic tools. Think about what this workspace looks like. 30 feet beneath a 100,000-ton vessel in harbor water so murky you can barely see your own hands. Above you, the flat bottom of the hull stretches out in every direction with no direct path to the surface. You have to swim laterally to the edge before you could ascend. Barnacles that have been growing for months have edges like broken glass. Tidal ships can change the ship's draft and squeeze the gap between the hull and the harbor floor without warning. If the tide drops while you're working the flat bottom, the geometry of your exit changes in real time. And above you, 4 nickel-aluminum bronze propellers, each one 21 feet across, each one weighing over 66,000 pounds. The ship is cold-ironed and secured, but nothing about this environment feels safe. But divers can only reach what the water lets them reach. Every few years, even that isn't enough, and the Navy has to do something that sounds almost absurd. They pull a 100,000-ton warship out of the ocean entirely. During a docking planned incremental availability, the Navy calls it a DPIA. The carrier is floated into a dry dock, the gates are sealed, and over 100 million gallons of water are pumped out. As the waterline drops, the hull emerges inch by inch, and what you see is sobering. 37 feet of steel that hasn't been fully exposed since the last dry dock, now sitting on massive keel blocks with the entire underwater body open to air for the first time in years. The scale stops making sense. You're standing on the dry dock floor looking up at a wall of steel that stretches over 1,000 feet in both directions. And somewhere above you is a flight deck you could barely see from down here, even if it weren't blocked by scaffolding. This is when the real inspection begins. Shipyard workers strip the anti-fouling paint down to bare steel and look for what the ocean has been doing underneath. Corrosion pitting, cracked welds, thinning plates. Every inch of hull plating that spent years submerged in salt water gets examined before a fresh anti-corrosion coating goes back on. Then the heavy work starts. Cranes lift each of the 4 propellers off their shafts, 66,000 pounds per propeller, swinging from a crane hook with a margin for error measured in inches, not feet. The propellers go to a machine shop where they're inspected for cavitation damage, stress cracks, and pitch distortion. Then rebalanced to tolerances tight enough that even a slight imperfection would cause vibration at 30 knots. The shafts themselves get pulled, measured, and restored, checked for wear, alignment, and corrosion along every foot of their length. Same with the rudders. Each one gets unshipped, inspected, refurbished, and reinstalled. While the hull is exposed, the sacrificial zinc anodes get replaced. These are slabs of zinc bolted to the hull that exist for one purpose: to corrode so the steel doesn't. Think of them as bodyguards that take a bullet. Salt water turns any 2 dissimilar metals into a battery, and without these anodes, the ocean would eat through the hull plating in a fraction of its intended lifespan. By the time the ship enters dry dock, many of these anodes have corroded down to almost nothing. They did exactly what they were designed to do. Now they get replaced, and the clock starts over. A DPIA can run 12 to 17 months. The midlife refueling overhaul, where they actually pull the nuclear fuel rods and refuel the reactors, takes even longer, sometimes 3 to 4 years. The USS John C. Stennis entered the Newport News shipbuilding in 2019 for its midlife overhaul, a process not expected to finish until 2026. That single overhaul involved thousands of shipyard workers and millions of man-hours of labor before the ship even touched water again. Nobody makes a movie about this. Nobody puts it on a recruiting poster. 1,000 feet of anchor chain, 4.5 acres of flight deck, over 1,000 feet of submerged hull, and every square inch of it needs someone with a tool and a job that will ruin their day. That's what keeps a 100,000-ton warship in the fight. Bye for now.